You've always been the disappointment, Jalen. That's what my mother said, out loud, at her own birthday dinner, right after the cake came out. My name's Jalen Moore. I'm 29, used to be a high school teacher in Indianapolis, until I walked away from a job that was breaking me, and a family that never really saw me unless I was failing at something they could use against me. It happened 2 months ago, but the words still hang in my chest like bad smoke. We were at this overpriced farm-to-table place my brother Terrence insisted on booking. Mom's 60th. Big occasion. Everyone dressed up, smiling like we were some suburban postcard. My sister-in-law even hired a photographer, like we were filming a campaign ad for the perfect Black family. I had driven in from Evansville just for this. 3.5 hours. I brought flowers, wore a blazer, tried to brace myself. I shouldn't have bothered. Terrence stood up mid-toast, wine glass raised, and started listing off his milestones like it was LinkedIn Live. CEO of Moore Wellness Consulting, soon to launch our community healing project. Blah, blah, blah. Everyone clapped like seals. Dad beamed. Mom looked like she was about to cry. Then he said it. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this family, for the values we shared, for the sacrifices you all made, especially Mom, for never giving up on us, even when some of us tried to drag the family down. My stomach dropped. I felt the table shift. Eyes turned. Some subtle, some not. Then Mom leaned over and said, just loud enough for the whole table to hush, "You've always been the disappointment, Jalen. Even as a kid, you never knew when to stay in line." She said it like it was a fact, like saying the sky's blue. Then she smiled and sipped her wine. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My throat went dry. I looked to my dad. He just pressed his lips together and stared at his plate. No one said anything. Not my cousins, not even Aunt May, who used to pinch my cheeks and call me her quiet genius. The photographer kept snapping. I waited until they started singing the birthday song. I stood up quietly, grabbed my coat from the back of my chair, and left before the candles even melted. No one followed. No one called. They didn't know I'd already packed everything I owned in the trunk of my car. Didn't know I'd left my apartment 2 days earlier, that I had no job lined up, that I'd spent the last few months trying to build something of my own, a program for art therapy in low-income schools. Didn't know that Terrence had once begged me to let him read my curriculum, saying, "I just want to help you scale it." Didn't know I saw my own diagrams and worksheets show up in his new brand launch video without a single mention of me. They didn't know because I stopped telling them things years ago. Because every time I opened my mouth, someone like my mom or Terrence made me regret it. I drove until the highway blurred, landed in a roadside motel near Bloomington with flickering lights and a manager who barely looked up. Paid cash. Room smelled like pine sol and something moldy underneath. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, staring at the wallpaper that curled near the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, my phone face down on the nightstand, buzzing once, then stopping. The next morning, I got an email from my bank. Final property transfer completed. 1247 Heights Drive, now under co-ownership of Mr. Terrence Moore. That was my grandmother's house. The one she left for me in her will. The only thing I thought they couldn't take. I didn't understand. I called the lawyer's office listed on the paperwork. "Sorry, Mr. Moore," the assistant said. "We received a signed authorization for the change last month. From your mother." I sat in silence. I didn't even know what to say. But in that moment, right there, in that cheap motel room, I knew one thing for certain. They weren't done erasing me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I kept playing it all back in my head. Mom's voice, the look on Terrence's face when he knew I wouldn't fight back, and the email that hit like a punch to the chest. My grandmother's house. Gone. Quietly signed away behind my back like I was just some tenant they'd finally gotten rid of. By morning, the motel room felt too still. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort. It accuses. I splashed water on my face in the cracked bathroom mirror and stared at the person looking back. I didn't recognize him. Tired. Empty. Like someone who finally realized no one was coming to save him. I had $312 left in my checking account. No home, no job, no one who'd call to ask if I was okay. I stuffed my sketchbook, a few pens, and my laptop into my backpack and walked toward town. My legs were stiff, but I moved like it was the only thing I had control over. Somewhere around 8 a.m., I passed a church I used to teach Sunday art classes at. The sign outside read, "Community space open. Free to use." I hesitated. The last time I stepped inside a church, it was for Grandma's funeral. Terrence gave the eulogy. I wrote it. No credit. Just like always. Still, something about the open door pulled me in. The main hall smelled like lemon cleaner and old wood. I found a corner, pulled out my sketch pad, and started jotting down ideas. What a safe, healing space could look like for teens who never felt heard. I spent the whole day there. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't post anything, just planned. That night, I bought a coffee from a gas station cafe that had a busted Wi-Fi sign taped to the window. It blinked just enough for me to log into an old Google Drive folder labeled Jay's Art Therapy Model. I hadn't touched it in over a year. It was raw, unfinished, but it was mine. I stayed until closing, then walked back to the motel with my phone buzzing again, this time with social media notifications. My cousin had posted a photo from the birthday dinner. Everyone smiling, glasses raised. The caption read, "Cheers to the ones who stayed solid." I wasn't in the photo. I clicked her profile, then Terrence's. His newest post? A clip from an interview. He sat across from some local podcaster, voice full of confidence. I was inspired by my family, especially my late grandmother. She used to say healing doesn't have to be loud to be real. That's the motto behind my program. He smiled like it was his quote. I dropped my phone. That wasn't just a motto. That was the closing line of the presentation I gave at Grandma's retirement party. Word for word. I stood up so fast the chair screeched across the motel floor. My hands were shaking. I knew that line. I owned that line. And then it hit me. Not only did they take my grandmother's house, they took her memory of me and repackaged it under Terrence's face like I never existed. It was beyond betrayal. It was erasure. And for what? A few claps from people who only knew the polished version of him? I needed air. I threw on a hoodie and walked the block, fists clenched in my pockets. I didn't know where I was going. I just kept moving. That's when I saw her. Mrs. Laney, my old mentor from high school, retired now. She was locking up a tiny storefront with a handmade sign that read, "Laney's Literacy Lab, free tutoring Wednesdays." We made eye contact. She squinted. "Jalen? Lord, it's been years." I nodded. My voice caught in my throat. "You okay?" she asked. And just like that, I broke. Not loudly, not messily. Just this slow unraveling inside, like someone finally turned on a light. She didn't ask questions, just unlocked the door again and said, "Come inside." We sat for an hour. I told her everything. Well, the parts I could say out loud. About the dinner, the house, the stolen program. When I showed her the clip from Terrence's interview, she leaned back and crossed her arms. "I remember that presentation," she said. "You gave it at the district conference. I still have your handout. He's using your framework." I blinked. Then she stood up, walked over to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a yellowed folder. Inside was the original outline I submitted to her for feedback back in 2018, complete with her notes in red pen and a signed cover page. Proof. Dated. Documented. I just stared at it. "I kept it," she said simply, "because I knew you'd build something one day." I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not even relief. Just grounding. Like the floor beneath me stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. Then she said, "You should take this. You might need it sooner than you think." And she was right, because less than 48 hours later, I got an email. From a local podcast producer, the same one who interviewed Terrence. Subject line: Hi, Jalen. We've been told you're the original creator. Can we talk? The email sat in my inbox like a live wire. We've been told you're the original creator. That one line knocked the air out of me. It was from The Modern Table, a podcast I used to admire, the same one Terrence had strutted into like he owned every idea that ever passed through our bloodline. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the screen, heart racing. Did someone actually say my name out loud? When I finally opened the full message, my eyes caught on a line halfway down. A source provided materials suggesting you developed the original framework Terrence Moore claimed as his. I clicked the attachment. It was my draft, my color-coded diagram, my handwriting. Even the little margin doodle I always added when I got stuck brainstorming. Someone had sent it to them. Not just to stir the pot, but to set the record straight. I felt the heat rise in my face. Not embarrassment, rage. Because here it was, clear as daylight. And for the first time in years, someone outside my broken family saw it for what it was. Theft. I replied. Calm, short, professional. I'd be open to a conversation. I'm happy to share original materials, timestamps, and context. And then I sat back in that creaky motel chair and felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Control. The next few days blurred into each other. I barely ate, barely slept. Just pieced everything together. Emails, lesson plans, presentation decks, early versions of the curriculum. Each file felt like stitching a part of myself back together. The podcast producer, Camille, scheduled a video call. She looked kind, tired but sincere. Off the record, she said. This stuff? It's strong, and honestly, we're reevaluating some of Terrence's claims. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream. The other part just wanted to breathe without feeling like I had to justify my own name. Then Camille said something I didn't expect. You're not the only one he's borrowed from. I blinked. She pulled up a doc on screen, an internal spreadsheet. Feedback from other contributors, quotes flagged for plagiarism, phrases lifted almost word for word from various niche creators, most of them never credited. And then she said, he's built a whole brand on other people's silence. I clenched my jaw, because I had been silent, for too damn long. That same night, I went digging, through old group chats, class emails, notes from when Terrence and I still talked, before everything curdled. And there it was, an old Dropbox link I'd sent him 3 years ago, titled Grandma's Legacy, Healing Through Art, Open Access, No Restrictions. He downloaded every single file. The folder had a final document, one I hadn't seen in years. Endnotes, for Jay. It was a letter, from Grandma, typed but signed in pen. Jalen, this is yours. Not because you need permission, but because I want it to be yours. Forever. You see people in a way others don't. That's rare. Use it wisely. I sat back, hand shaking over the mouse. She knew, even back then. By the end of the week, The Modern Table released a quiet update. We are reviewing previously aired content due to new documentation provided by sources. No direct shots, no names. But it was enough. Enough for Terrence to notice. Because the next morning, he posted a cryptic Instagram story. Black screen, white text. Bitter people always want to take credit for what they couldn't finish. I almost laughed. That afternoon, I got a call. Blocked number. I answered anyway. Jalen. His voice, smooth, practiced, fake. You could have come to me, he said, instead of trying to burn everything down. I didn't start the fire, I said flatly. You just finally ran out of things to steal. There was silence, then a low chuckle. You think anyone's going to care about your little folder of files? I didn't answer, but inside something snapped back into place. Not pain, not pride, proof. Then he said something I'll never forget. Do what you want. Just know you're not built for war. And that would have been the end of it, except an hour later, I got a DM from a stranger. No message, just a photo. A screenshot from Terrence's team Slack channel. One of his interns had leaked it. The file name? Rebrand plan. Remove Jalen references. Under it, make sure we delete all references before launch. No trace. They weren't just pretending I didn't exist. They were planning to erase me all over again. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because I was afraid, because I was done being afraid. The moment I saw that screenshot, remove Jalen references, something cold and clean settled in my chest. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was a decision. They wanted war in silence? Fine. But this time I'd write the script. The next morning, I went to the public library, sat in one of those creaky blue chairs, and opened everything. My Dropbox, my Google Drive, my old email threads, my sketches, my original timestamped slides, Camille's message, Mrs. Laney's annotated hard copy, every single receipt. Then I did the one thing Terrence never saw coming. I filed a formal intellectual property claim. It wasn't flashy. No drama. Just facts. I uploaded everything to the state filing portal. Took my time. Triple-checked every page. Then submitted. It was quiet when I left the library, but the kind of quiet that comes before thunder. That night, I got a text from my mother. First one in almost a year. Terrence says you're trying to destroy what he built. Please don't do this to the family. No apology, just a request to let it go. For them. I didn't reply. Because here's the thing. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped building for people who never planned to give me credit. 2 days later, my phone blew up. My podcast interview with the Modern Table went live. I didn't throw Terrence under the bus. Didn't need to. I just spoke plainly. Shared my story. What I built. What I lost. What I documented. At one point, Camille asked me, "What would you say to people who tell you to forgive and move on?" I looked straight at the camera. I did move on. I moved forward. They just didn't think I'd bring my receipts with me. That clip alone racked up over 300,000 views in 24 hours. And then, the real cracks started to show. It began with comments. Then Reddit threads. Then LinkedIn posts from educators who remembered my early work. Then screenshots from interns and assistants who had left Terrence's wellness collective after seeing him pass off other people's research as his own. I didn't even have to say anything anymore. The internet did it for me. But the moment that made me stop breathing was when I got a notification from the National Coalition for Mental Health Access. Subject line: "We need to talk about your original work." Turns out, Terrence had applied for a national grant. A big one. 6 figures. And guess which curriculum he submitted with the proposal? Mine. Word for word. Down to the diagram with Grandma's quote at the bottom. They had already seen the podcast. Already connected the dots. They weren't reaching out to accuse. They were reaching out to offer me the grant instead. I stared at the email for a solid 5 minutes before I exhaled. Then my phone buzzed again. Blocked number. Again. I picked up. It was Terrence. Panicked this time. Breathing hard. "You need to fix this, Jalen. I'm losing contracts. Sponsors are pulling out. My board wants answers. You think this makes you look noble? It makes you look bitter." I stayed silent. I gave you a chance to be part of something bigger. You could have had a piece. Hell, I offered you co-founder credit before this all blew up. That made me laugh. A dry, tired laugh. "You offered me silence," I said. "You offered me a corner of my own work." Then his voice dropped to a lower register, one I knew all too well. "I swear, if you keep this up, you'll regret it. I'll file a cease and desist. Defamation. Whatever I have to." But I already had the trump card, and I'd been holding it close. So I said nothing. Just texted a single file to his email. The one labeled, Will, property rights, Jalen Moore. The document Grandma had signed, stamped, dated, filed 5 years ago with her lawyer, leaving me the sole intellectual heir to her curriculum, her quotes, and everything we built together. I didn't even wait for a reply. I just walked to the nearest notary, got a fresh copy certified, and dropped it off at the IP office. But that's not the twist. The twist came the next morning when Camille forwarded me a private message her producer received, sent anonymously. It was a screenshot of a private group chat. Terrence, my mother, and their attorney. The message from my mom read, "We need to delete that will before anyone else sees it. He can't find the hard copy." They thought I didn't know. They thought Grandma hadn't already given me the original, hidden in the lining of the wooden art box I kept under my bed since I was 16. They didn't just try to erase me. They planned to erase her. The thing about betrayal is, it never stays clean. It always leaves stains. The morning I got that message, the one where my own mother said, "We need to delete that will before he finds the hard copy," I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, staring at the screen, tea going cold in my hands, realizing there was nothing left to save. They hadn't just lied to me. They hadn't just taken from me. They tried to erase the last good thing I had left of Grandma. And for what? A brand deal? A fake legacy? Some curated, sparkle-filtered version of family that only existed if I stayed silent? No more. I printed 5 copies of that will. I got each notarized. I filed 2 with legal services, 1 with my lawyer, 1 with the IP board. And the last? I folded it and slipped it back into Grandma's old art box, tucked under the paint-stained lining where she hid it for me in the first place. And then I did the final thing I swore I'd never do. I went public. Not for sympathy. Not to cancel anyone. But because people like Terrence and my mother, they build their power on silence. And I wasn't going to give them that anymore. I posted a 6-minute video. No background music, no filter, just me and the truth. I held up the will. I read Grandma's words out loud. I showed the time-stamped curriculum drafts, the emails, the Slack leak, the lawyer's certification. And at the very end, I said, "You don't get to rewrite history just because you're louder. And you don't get to inherit someone's name if you bury the one person who carried it." The video took off, way beyond what I expected. I went to bed with a few dozen views. By morning, it had crossed 100,000. And then the dominoes fell. Terrence's collective released a PR statement 2 days later, trying to pivot. "We acknowledge there may have been creative overlaps in early materials. Blah, blah. Nothing real. Nothing honest." But the grant committee wasn't buying it. They revoked his funding. Officially. Sponsors pulled out. 3 of his corporate partners dropped him within a week. Even the Modern Table scrubbed his episode from their archive and issued a correction citing unauthorized material use. But the part that shocked me most? He sued me. Yeah. Filed an injunction trying to block my website, my curriculum, claiming defamation and misappropriation of materials. We walked into court on a rainy Tuesday. He wore a navy blazer like always. My mom was there too, sitting behind him. Eyes fixed on me like I'd broken some sacred rule by telling the truth. And then, my lawyer slid the will across the table. Signed, witnessed, filed 5 years ago. The judge looked at it, looked at Terrence and said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Moore, what you've presented here is not ownership. It's appropriation." Case dismissed. He didn't even look at me when he left the courtroom. Mom followed, clutching her purse like it was the last thing holding her together. I didn't say a word, because justice doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like silence they can't use against you anymore. I'm living somewhere new now. Small studio above a bookstore in Bloomington. Quiet. But I get to teach again. My own curriculum, under my own name. I even launched a small grant for low-income students who want to pursue art therapy. Named it after Grandma. The Marion Trust. She'd like that, I think. Sometimes family doesn't break you by accident. Sometimes they do it because they know you're strong enough to survive it. And that terrifies them. I didn't fight to get even. I fought to get free. If you've ever been through something like this, been silenced, discredited, or erased, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And if this hit home in any way, feel free to stay with us. We're building something honest here, one truth at a time.